This video discusses topics that may be distressing or triggering for some viewers. Topics include mental health, suicidal ideation, drug use, addiction, abuse, and other potentially triggering themes. The content in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you or someone you know are struggling or in a negative mental state, please seek help. Links to Australian support services are in the description below.
I'm a Muslim, I'm a Christian, I'm whatever you want me to be. It all comes down to the same thing. You're in a loving place or you're in an unloving place. I just want to be myself. If I lose a few fringe people who can't deal with the fact that there's other forces in the world, that's okay with me.
The meaning of life? You want to know what it is? Love yourself.
No, my entire life I've been putting on a show, mate. I don't even need a script at this point. Yeah, that's why I'm doing it. Yeah, I did all the notes and everything. I just wanted to run the idea by you one more time because obviously I've did the petition. The more people ask me shit, the longer it takes me to do stuff, man. It's the point of the podcast. Come and listen if you want to. Alright, man. Alright. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month. It goes up this month. I don't know when, but it'll be up there. I love you, mate. Get better, dude. No, I'm good, homie. Yeah, that's the point of it. It's a broadcast, it's a broadcast, it's a podcast. Fuck, I don't know, man. I just call it a modcast. Because I'm tired and I want to moderate my life better. I decided I would do it. I'm going to release the bigger video explaining the longer version of the story, about how I worked on the suicide hotline, about Kim, about how I was an egotistical, egocentric narcissist for most of my life, and how I needed to learn how to stop running from myself, accept my diagnoses, and actually start to work on myself and stop being high all the time to actually figure out my shit. So please stick around. It's going to be 30 minutes. I completely understand if you don't want to. As I said, there is a shorter version, but this is essentially to show you that I've done the work. This is to show you how I did that work, what I did in the back end of things, behind the curtain. Now, I am going to be reading from a script, so I'm going to be adding little visual things and cues and photos of my life and videos and all that sort of stuff to sort of compensate for that, because I do apologize. It is going to be very strange, but ultimately, look, it was a lot to try to explain. I've written it down 100 times. I've tried to rehearse it 100 times. And I can talk in a tangent, and I really can. I could talk my way through the entire thing on a live stream. If anyone wanted to ask me questions, all the information would line up and be the same. But to know exactly the how to follow the timeline is very difficult, especially when you're traumatized and you're trying to reflect and you're trying to go through your own journey. And like, I say things like traumatized because I was diagnosed with CPTSD. I have been diagnosed with autism. I have been diagnosed with ADHD. I have been diagnosed with bipolar. I have been diagnosed with CPTSD, as I said. I have been diagnosed with a bunch of things, and I've done a bunch of things with medication. I've followed a lot of psychiatry and psychology, and it's very hard to follow that journey with all the events in life and get it correct from start to finish. So I have to write it down. I have to write things about my life, about my feelings, about my experiences. It's going to all make sense. I'm going to let the video play now, but look, this is just for people who actually want to hear it. So thank you so much for being here. I love you. Whew. Okay. I've been procrastinating this one's up and fierce. I've been working on the podcast. I've been getting some stuff out, but it's time. Let me start with a statement that may come as a surprise to some, but after the last couple of years, may be extremely obvious to others. For most of my adult life, I've been a narcissistic, attention-seeking, success-chasing, external validation requiring douchebag. That's right. I said it. But before I became this arrogant, reprehensible pig of a human being, I was just a kid. Not a bad kid, just loud, easy to excite. My brain wouldn't shut up. Ever. I'm going to explain who I was, how I became a sales prodigy, and how I destroyed every aspect of my life on this repeated 2 to 3 yearly cycle, until eventually I had to deal with the depression, anxiety, obesity, addiction, and face myself for who I really wanted to be and who I'd become. The kid who didn't learn to ride a bike, or didn't want to commit to boxing or karate lessons or soccer or footy or anything that he was introduced to. The kid who'd rather spend an entire weekend alone in his bedroom than go out and do something with other people. The kid who had more friends who were girls than boys because boys never seemed to understand him. Because shit, I was barely able to understand myself. The kid who would rather escape into his imagination or fantasy books, spend the whole day watching anime rather than going outside because I loved music, I loved Nintendo, I loved watching Dragon Ball Z or Pokemon, and I hated deviating from what I truly enjoyed. I hated learning skills that had anything to do with something I wasn't interested in, so I could never focus on them. I'd give up so fast because I could never remember things. And school, because of that fact, was just an absolute nightmare. Now, when I say I thought I was broken, I don't mean broken in some dramatic movie-like sense, but just different. I got diagnosed a couple times as a kid, like with traits of ADHD and autism. I was placed on Epilum, other antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, but my parents would take me off them because of the effect it would have on my personality. They'd rather have their happy, silly, loud little boy than some robot who could barely process the world around him due to the fuzz he felt in his brain. I got bullied a little bit in primary school, but I was able to deflect and move to different parts of the school ground and hide in a computer room or a library if I wasn't already running around pretending to be Dragon Ball Z characters with my friends. So that being said, in primary school, I had 1 or 2 close friends. Anyone and everyone else basically didn't exist to me. We were the 3 weird amigos. We would play video games together, we would make weird noises, we would run around pretending to be any myriad of characters from TV or anime that we'd watch, and we'd play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, or talk about the Nintendo magazine, or K-Zone, or Halo, or The Sims, or whatever we just got our hands on. Outside of being mean, I guess I just didn't really exist outside to the rest of the world, aside from being within this little triangle of nerdy awesomeness. Because outside of that nerdy awesomeness triangle, honestly, it just sucked. I was always the fat kid who hated sports and would prefer to draw anime or watch Dragon Ball Z or play Kingdom Hearts to anyone else that I met in life. And at this point in time, being someone that enjoyed video games or being a gamer and all that sort of stuff outside of like an occasional game of Mario Kart or Mario Party or whatever, being someone who delved hours and days into video games was still so off-putting to the masses. Anyone I met at school or otherwise would laugh and simply say things like, "What, you don't like to play outside? You don't want to come and ride bikes?" No, I really didn't want to. And no one ever understood that. I don't think it really had anything to do with the activities that would be happening in the outside world. Honestly, I think it just came down to the lack of motor function. I hated being embarrassed. I still do. And because I never worked on those skills, I always sucked at them. I felt like a burden to the teams that would actually pick me, and I was always picked last, and I started avoiding it altogether. Like really early on in my school career. I got into this habit of giving up on things that I wasn't good at straight away, and to be honest, my whole life timeline has been really confusing for me to reflect on. I hated confrontation, but I was so quick to anger and would cause it. I hated loud rooms, but I was always the loudest one. I hated feeling watched, but I loved external validation. I especially loved escaping. Escapism was like my brand as a child. I would find any avenue nearby to transfer from my reality into somewhere else, even if temporarily. Books, video games, fantasy worlds, role-playing games where I could just become or pretend to be anything that wasn't me. Because if I didn't have to be me, I would feel safer. And that online world I found, that community of people who couldn't see me for the weird, fat, nerdy teenager I felt identified as by the rest of the world, made me feel safer than anyone else ever did. So I kept hiding there, hanging out in Azeroth, until I was forced to interact with the rest of the world as this fat, nerdy kid again. For years, everyone saw the symptoms, but nobody really saw the cause. Teachers thought I wasn't applying myself. I'd be a class clown or a depressed teenager. I couldn't focus on what they were saying, but I somehow always had the answers to the questions on their tests. I'd wag the classes, but I'd pass the exams. Adults thought I was lazy because I didn't want to do the labor they'd grown up doing. Some thought I was arrogant because I had answers to questions they didn't, but all I was doing was operating an online search engine whenever curious. Others thought I was awkward, weird, or just a loser, who simply tried to ignore my presence or they would use me for a laugh. And eventually I laughed too. Honestly, I still remember being called Butterball or Pumbaa or Doughboy. I started to embrace it. Make fun of my moobs or my height or anything about my face. The fact that my nose was kind of up at the time, and I just started embracing that more and more and letting people make an ass out of myself. Because honestly, if everyone else was going to make me the joke, I might as well tell the punchline. I might as well beat them to it. In 2011, I was caring for my mum whilst attending the last couple of years of high school. I was bullied my entire life by this point. I got to 132 kilos and I was so depressed, the only time I felt anything remotely close to safe was when I was online playing World of Warcraft with my friends. Otherwise, I'd wag school to go to my local internet cafe where I could surround myself with people that had at least remotely similar interests as I did. Or I'd stay home as often as I could, and I'd do anything I could to get away from the rest of the world around me. I basically dropped out of school at this point. Aside from attending exams, I was desperately trying to disappear from the person I was. I stopped talking about things that I really enjoyed. Humor became my armor. Self-deprecation became my survival. Every room just became another stage where I had to perform, pretend that I was a part of it, pretend that the only time I could genuinely ever be myself was when I was at my computer. But I don't know, like, adults thought that I just didn't want to apply myself, but I could just never focus. They thought I was lazy because I didn't want to do the labor, like I said, but I just applied myself to things that only piqued my curiosity. If something piqued my curiosity, such as literature or history or media, I would delve into those subjects with a fierce passion and I would pass so easily. And it stayed this way for most of my school career. I would either be passing classes I enjoyed with flying colours or completely failing other classes because of the embarrassment of having to ask questions in front of other people or admit that I was too stupid and that was too confrontational to me, so I would just wag and I would fail. When school ended and I suddenly had all of this free time and nowhere to go aside from the online worlds, I spent a bunch of time on YouTube and things trying to figure out, like, I loved YouTubers like Markiplier and PewDiePie and the Game Grumps and all these guys that seemed a little bit like me, but they were so much more likable than me. So I found this guy, Ziz, on YouTube after playing a game of Dota when I was 17 with my very good friend at the time. And I saw all these motivational videos about bodybuilders and powerlifters and how everyone loved them and looked up to them and thought they were the coolest, strongest, most attractive people around, or at least that was my interpretation of it. So I went into my local supplement shop called Athletes with Attitude, and my world shifted for the first time. This manager, this guy who up until my psychotic break last year I looked up to as a role model for most of my young life, he watched me look at the Celtec box, which had the biggest, most ripped people on the packaging. It was creatine, full of carbohydrates. I was 132 kilos. Like, I remember this distinctly. But he gave me this really humble smile. And he said, I'm not selling you anything. Go take that money. Go and buy some chicken. Go and buy some veggies. Go to the gym. Get yourself a gym membership. And just come back. And so I did. 2 to 3 weeks later, I came back in all excited. I lost 10 kilos. I lost 10 kilos. I lost 10 kilos. And I started visiting that shop once or twice a week. Long story short, I lost 52 kilos in that first year. I started working for them casually, and I became an advocate for what the gym can do for someone. This was my first experience with mirroring. I started mirroring this manager all the time. I became a little version of him. Suddenly, people from school were nice to me. Girls wanted to talk to me. People on the street smiled at me, helped me with things, actually listened when I spoke. I cut my hair short for the first time in years. Eventually, I started wearing a hat backwards. I never deviated from it. And then one day I got something wrong, and he said the words to me, I don't want you to just be another me. I want you to just be yourself. I didn't know how to figure out who that was. Like, I had just gotten my first girlfriend. I'd made a bunch of friends at the gym being my own version of how he was. And after adapting my personality to fit his mannerisms, while still playing a lot of video games in the background, I had met someone who valued my personality, and I had already latched myself onto improving my self-image. And it had given me this newfound confidence. But unfortunately, teaching me a very harsh reality about the world I was living in. And that my personality was only a problem if it was coming from an ugly body. I remember thinking to myself constantly, don't deviate from this image I'd created. Post the statuses on Facebook. Chase external validation. The world likes me now. Like, you can still see my old Facebook prior to me losing weight on Facebook somewhere. And all the horribly hateful, upset, angry statuses I was posting all the time because I was dealing with family life and home life, and my mum was unwell, and I was dealing with all this bullying, and I was failing classes, and I just had so much external pressure. But then suddenly the world liked me now. So I'd started a new Facebook, and I started posting for external validation, and I started showing off my weight loss journey, and I started getting tips on weight gain and weight loss and muscle building and this and that. And after losing weight, I got a girlfriend for the first time at 18, and she helped me with building confidence. She taught me about fashion and how to dress nicely and how to match colors and how to be funny without going too far into the weird. I learned more and more about social norms amongst the female population. I stayed heavily involved with the gym and the bodybuilding community. I made a few role models, and unfortunately they started giving me ideals about how I was too young to already be tied down, and how I'd only experienced one woman and I was less of a man for it. And these people were people I hung out with every single day. And apparently I needed to chase success and fame, and unfortunately, because I already had an inherent need for external validation, it just seemed to follow me everywhere I went. So because these people that I looked up to so much were no longer validating the way I was, instead of owning what I was and what I had and being grateful, I embraced that hunger for more, and I turned into a very conflicted, egocentric, narcissistic person who only had one focus: be successful, be a player, earn money, get muscles. And unfortunately, and I guess fortunately in some ways, then I found sales. Sales helped me ramp my social skills. Unfortunately, it exposed me to a world that too deeply aligned with values that further corrupted my sense of morality. And again, instead of fighting the confliction and choosing a path of honesty and integrity, I got sucked in by the potential to be the best. Because I was extremely good, top 5 ranking salespeople at the company at the time. And I was so sucked in that I became just that. I became the best at being able to ignore my moral compass and to find excuses for disgusting behavior. I became the best at pushing people away if they saw the real me, the vulnerable, fat, nerdy boy that stayed with me regardless of how many muscles or dollars I gained. My next perspective shift was when I remember sitting across from my sales manager, and I was 21 years old. I'd been working there for a couple of years at this point. I loved every second of it, until one of my very close friends in this world, still to this day, got caught up in his manipulations. I found out about sexual abuse allegations of multiple other staff members, why 2 of my friends had stopped working there, and still, I was so scared of losing all of what I'd built for myself and losing my career and not knowing what my rights were and too scared to ask the wrong person. I did nothing to help. I did nothing to stop him. And I've never been able to let go of that guilt. Eventually, WorkSafe got involved and the situation was handled, but the damage to myself, my community, the people around me had been done. I started drinking, chasing dopamine every opportunity that presented itself, and faking everything about myself to the public community I surrounded myself with, and through a cycle of events that I can only liken to latching onto anything that gave me a resemblance of hope for my self-preservation, hope that I'd begin to respect myself or become someone respectable, and a series of events that led me to imploding my life over and over and over again for the sake of running from the situation and the person I was stuck in. I went from egocentric and problematic and went into complete self-loathing at the same time. So conflicting. What I needed was nothing like what I was led to believe from the people I surround myself by. Always told I needed to make that next sale, get with that girl, buy that cool new thing, keep my dopamine levels up, and I bought into it. I was no better. And all I really needed was help. I could never accept the help I needed because I could never accept the fact that I had what I had. I was so sick of being different. After I found this adaptation that people actually accepted, I ran with it and I kept running with it and I kept running back to it. But you can only keep an image up for so long and eventually cracks would always come through. I'd go into this crazy fight or flight manic response where I'd destroy whatever it was I'd be doing, making my moral compass go insane on the inside. Full of guilt and shame and anger, I would burn whatever was happening in my world to the ground and repeat the process over and over and over again, finding some way to either be a victim or be the moral high ground and walk away from whatever that was causing me grief. And then I would start again, chasing that success that I got from being a salesperson, chasing that success I got from being a player. I kept doing this over and over and over again for years, whilst secretly being myself on the online community and making very dear friends that I'm still friends with to this day that knew the real me. And I kept doing this until I met a very dear friend by the name of Kim. And about 30 years my senior, I met her on World of Warcraft. She talked to me one day after raid night and said, "You've got autism." And my response for the first time in my life was actually true honesty. How did you know? No running, no hiding. She saw me. She had an autistic son. She made me feel so safe to talk about it. And this was midst COVID, midst addiction. 170 plus kilos heavy. I think I got up to 189 kilos that year. And after surviving an extremely traumatic relationship that ended me trying to jump in front of a train at Southern Cross Station, Kim saw me for exactly who I was and helped me understand so many things about myself. I had never been honest about my history of cheating or lying or running. But being honest allowed Kim to really dig into my brain, help me understand things about myself, about the professional psychiatrists and psychologists, and about what they had been trying to help me with and understand for literally years. Probably 15 almost years at this point. But I just never trusted those people enough to open up about things I was actually doing to myself and the people around me because I was so scared of the judgment that would be attached to that. She helped me understand my whys, my reasons, who I was. She had an extremely powerful brain. She was incredible with psychology. She was very interested in all of it, and clearly being a mum of a son with, autism, and clearly being someone that had lived through some of the hardest times for women, and had seen things in her past generations and seen other people in her family with their own mental health struggles and things. She had this incredible way of really talking to me honestly about myself. Why my emotions felt so explosive, why my mind never stopped. She introduced me to Jung and Adler and Freud and the movie American Psycho. We talked about so many things. I still keep a photo of her with me to this day. She helped me understand myself and why every criticism felt like proof that I wasn't enough. When you spend your whole life surviving, you don't build an identity. You build defense mechanisms, you build habits and addictions and escape plans, you chase that next feeling to avoid the last one. Over time, she taught me that survival changes you. You can become defensive before anyone can hurt you. You can put up an image and only show people this external, positive, outward amalgamation of confidence. You become abrasive before anyone can reject you, blowing opportunities up, relationships up, pretty much burning anything to the ground that even threatened the very idea of leaving you before you could leave it. You become louder because nobody ever listened when you were quiet. You fill the void in awkward space or lose yourself in music because if it's suddenly quiet, you're left with the awkwardness of your own company and the things that you've done. The racing thoughts and demons that circulate inside your head. Sometimes you become so focused on protecting yourself, you begin to see only your own pain. During my time with Kim, I had worked voluntarily for a mental health line after working at multiple high-level customer service jobs for the likes of Telstra and Vic Roads and the ATO. And I started doing two things to try and find a version of myself I could respect. I started my photography business, DWR Photography, because at this point, I hadn't been near a woman in a long time. I desperately missed the feeling of feeling good about myself, and I struggled to do anything about it. And I decided if I hate myself, maybe I can learn to love other people and help them love themselves a little more. And in some by proxy of that, I might find a respect for myself again from a light that is purely only giving. I started working for the mental health hotline. At first, I volunteered for Lifeline for a campaign they had during April, May, and June, leading into Men's Mental Health Month where they needed extra hands on deck. With Kim's help, I started analysing the conversations I'd have with these people and comparing it to my own self, my own mental health, my own suicidal ideation, my own experience with psychology and psychiatry, my own addiction. She really helped me achieve a greater sense of compassion and empathy and a greater depth of understanding of the psychology of mental health and what it took to truly push past that breaking point. There were so many instances during these conversations late at night, after playing World of Warcraft, after getting really high, that I would just break down and suddenly start crying about my life and these conversations I was having with people about their own experiences and how hard it was to keep doing it. I still remember her saying to me constantly, anytime I dig too deep into my own experience and get upset and I'd go quiet, and she'd simply say in that time, in that same warm tone of voice, "Oh, Maud, you poor confused boy. You are enough. You always were. You never had to hide who you were. Keep trying. We can talk about this more again tomorrow." And then we'd talk about something funny or silly, and she'd find a way to make me focus on just trying again. And then we would catch up the next day. Looking back, I can see moments where I became egocentric. Moments where I mistook self-protection for strength. Moments where I displayed traits that didn't just look narcissistic, but absolutely were. Not because I believed I was better than anyone else, but because I didn't know who I was without the walls I'd spent decades building and without that validation of knowing that someone else out there thought I was worth something. Because when you've never had an identity, you cling to whatever keeps you alive. Even if it slowly destroys you, whatever that dopamine injection looks like, whether it's the gym, a drug addiction, a new hobby or interest, you chase whatever the next high is and you keep feeling that modicum of what you think is normal. During my first year on the hotline, I had this guy call who I had this beautiful in-depth conversation with. He originally called because he had lost his kid, his wife. He was struggling with alcoholism. He was contemplating ending it all. We got through the conversation together, and somehow, 3 weeks later, as we were entering June, I got him on the line again, which was absurd. To know the sheer number of people that call in to these hotlines and the amount of people working them, for me to end up talking to this guy again within that month was incredible. He sounded relieved to hear my voice. He said he'd called a week prior, but got a different agent, and that person told him that his son would be disappointed of him if he too killed himself. And his response to that statement was the thought process of, well, my son's not here anymore to be disappointed. He's dead. So I failed as a father. I should be dead too. And he almost ended it all right in that moment, seconds after he hung up the phone. We ended up speaking again for another hour or two, and I broke a rule of the hotline you shouldn't break. I gave him my personal information. I vowed to be available to him, and at that point in time, I dedicated myself to that month, leading up to June, to have a personal line for people I'd spoken with, or anyone they'd needed to get help for, and vowed that they would be able to call me. The following year, in the very first week of my promise of Men's Mental Health Month, my very dear friend, who I basically thought of as my second mum at this point, got really sick. And then one day, she grew her truly deserved angel wings and left this world behind. And Kim was gone. Suddenly, I started smoking again. I started hiding again. The calls kept coming in, and I'd made a promise that I'd use the work we did together to keep answering. But the conversations were so hard to hear with my own grief I was dealing with. I smoked more and more. I avoided life. I gained so much weight it was something uncontrollable. I got sepsis. I almost died multiple times. I got caught up in this disgusting abusive relationship. I blinked. It was 2023, and I was running back to my parents' house to hide again with nothing but my dog, my computer, and my bed. Again, the grief, the responsibilities I had, the pain, I ran from it. Thankfully, I still had these beautiful friends, family, people that cared, but they knew me as that funny, drug-addicted gamer that lifted heavy things and made a joke out of everything. They didn't know about the hotline. They didn't know about the autism. They just thought I was mentally unwell. Kim was the only one that knew that side to me. Well, fast forward to my final year on the hotline, which was in 2025. I dealt with losing family and friends. My fight or flight response had been fully engaged for weeks, and if not months. I was working in disability as a support worker, still heavily addicted to drugs, whilst in a relationship with a wonderful person who saw me for the goodness that I wanted to be. But again, I felt like I didn't deserve it. I'd made too many promises. I couldn't keep them. I couldn't find a way to be honest about it. So I ended things the only way I knew how. I did it explosively and horrendously and abruptly, and I just ran. I was taking phentermine to keep myself awake so I could write notes and make videos and still work full-time as a disability support worker. I was still smoking 24/7 because fast forwarding 2 to 3 months later after that situation to March and April 2025, I hadn't slept for weeks. I'd been smoking 24/7 for literally months at this point, and I had this idea to start the Better Men broadcast to help men be better and live better lives, because I wanted 2025 to be my final year on the hotline. I was going to take all the stories I'd heard and listened to and the conversations I'd had over the 4 years that I'd done, and I was going to write them in a way that I could present them to the masses in a way for someone out there to maybe somewhere have some hope about what they were going through. But I destroyed everything I held dear in my life. And this time, because I'd not slept and because I couldn't deal with my own bullshit and because I couldn't be honest about my life, I destroyed everything again. But this time it included something I never thought I would lose. A circle of mates that I'd had for almost 7 or 8 years at this point. And within 2 months, I was left with myself. And that's it. And that was completely my doing. At first, I hated being in the acute unit. I didn't want the help. I had already started coming down from my psychotic episode, but I didn't bother to open up about my mental health history for my autism. They'd labelled it as bipolar, and I took the antipsychotics they gave me. I got a job. I followed the quitting program to stay off cannabis, and I told them about my previous history with psychiatrists and psychologists after I got out of the unit. And I told them about my history with Kim and the work we'd done together. I showed them all my notes, everything I'd done. And as soon as I was sober properly, my psychiatrist helped me wean off of the risperidone and the lithium that I'd been taking for the now misdiagnosed bipolar disorder. Somehow, I broke the cycle. I started being honest. And I haven't stopped since. No more pretending, no more escaping, no more blaming everyone else. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time I kept looking. I didn't run, I decided to stay, and not because I loved the man looking back at me, but because he deserved the chance to become someone worth loving. Now, that's when psychology stopped being an interest of self-reflection and became a lifeline. Freud taught me that the past never truly disappears. Jung taught me that the parts of ourselves we hide eventually demand to be seen, and Adler taught me that responsibility of now is of the utmost importance. But Kim, she taught me the number one thing I should have known all along. That I am and was worthy of being loved. I just need to be honest and accept myself for who I am. Autism, ADHD, Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Labels I'd spent years fearing for the greater half of my 20s, that I'd prefer to release into clouds of smoke than face head-on, became the map I'd spent my whole life searching for. Healing wasn't instant. Healing wasn't glamorous. Some days it meant that I was just getting out of bed. Some days it meant staying sober. Some days it meant saying no to the voice in my head that insisted everyone would be better off without me. It meant confronting my addiction. It meant confronting my obesity. It meant confronting my anxiety and my depression, my self-hatred. Every version of myself I'd spent decades trying to outrun, because here's the cruel truth of it. You can outrun everybody else. But you can't run from you. You are the only one you're left with at the end of every day. So you may have traits of NPD or CPTSD, ADHD, ASD, BPD, bipolar disorder. You may be dealing with trauma or the self-deprecating spiral that we all find ourselves trapped in at one point or another. But if you're broken, you can rebuild. Because you just need to understand yourself and be honest and try to do better. You may simply be surviving in ways nobody ever understood. Maybe in ways you don't even understand yourself. And survival isn't the end of your story. It can be your reset. It can be your beginning. Because eventually you run out of places to hide from yourself, and the only way to move forward will be to own up to yourself, your failures, see yourself for who you are, stare yourself down, and start again. Today I don't claim to have all the answers, but I still struggle. I still overthink. I still have days when my brain feels louder than the world around me, but I finally know who I am and accept it. I'm not just the weird kid. I'm not a failure. I'm not an addict. I'm not just my diagnoses. I'm not just the mask I've held for years. I am just me. My podcast isn't some project to become super famous or change my life for some grandiose look at me ideal. I'm already rebuilding. I've been working in the background behind the curtain in the darkness, facing my own darkness for the last 12 months, and I will continue to do so, keeping my own journey very personal and honest and true. But I'm following my aspirations, and I've got that covered. But if my story, if the things that I'm saying, if even one person sees one of my videos while they're sitting alone in their bedroom, convinced that they're broken, I hope that they hear this. And if there's even a slight fraction that this journey, this video, this experience, anything in between has resonated with even a little part of you about yourself or someone you know, I want you to reach out. I want you to talk to your friends, your family, your community, anyone who will listen. Seek the help you need to seek. And it took the love of multiple incredible people, beautiful women, amazing family, wonderful friends, and some of them, a lot of them, I will never get back, to finally show me who I am. And show me what my true self was always, and is always, and can be enough. And if there's even a slight chance someone out there sees this and has a shift in perspective to allow them to change before it's too late, it has all been worth it. Because you are never alone. You can survive. You can rebuild. And you can get better. So that is the example of how I eventually broke the cycle of being a self-preserving, egotistical, egocentric narcissist. And if you somehow made it to the end of this, then thank you for being here, and welcome to the Modcast podcast. Not just the home of the Better Men broadcast or Techie Time, not just the home of the Psychology for Success, but an open, forgiving home for anyone neurotypical, neurodivergent, anyone in between that is simply trying to understand and do better. So to everyone out there that has ever listened or heard about the things I've done or been a part of the experience, thank you so much for being there when you were there for me, the things you taught me, the forgiveness you showed me, and ultimately I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But you are incredible, and I love you. So if there's anyone out there that's struggling with their mental health, there are some links below, as per the start of the video, with a bunch of different services that you can attempt to reach out to. Or you can reach out to me, or your local community, or your school teacher, or your psychiatrist, or your doctor. Get a referral, find where you need to go, and start the rebuild. Everyone loves a good renovation, brother. Thank you for being a part of the Modcast podcast. See you in the next one.